Hey, what's party? Welcome back to News Dose, and I think we have a couple fun stories today. One is related to Xbox and their newfound direction. You know, the thing about their strategy is that not everybody necessarily agrees with it. It has faced a lot of backlash online, but it now sounds like they have a pretty big supporter, and this kind of begs the question, is Xbox actually correct after all, and could other console makers potentially follow suit? Well, we're getting all of that, and then also a dream AAA game that could soon become a reality. First, though, I do want to thank my supporters on Patreon and on YouTube memberships. Thank you just so much for what you do, and you will receive this video through early access. Let's go get right into things, though, starting off with Ubisoft and the long-awaited Prince of Persia Sands of Time remake. Of course, years ago, they basically rebooted the remake after its first reveal. You know, it didn't exactly go as planned. Fans were very critical of its art style, but credit to Ubisoft. They could have just simply canceled the remake after all of its backlash, but they didn't do that. They stuck with it, they redesigned it, and well, now, after years, there's some speculation going around that its re-reveal could happen at the Game Awards on December 11th. Now, for the time being, this is only speculation, and it should be treated as such. But there is a reason to believe that it could potentially be at this year's Game Awards, and that's simply because Ubisoft earlier in the year did list it as a title that they plan to release before the end of their fiscal year, which ends on March 31st of 2026. So, I mean, as long as they stick to that, it is possible that they could re-reveal it at the Game Awards and then release it in early 2026. I mean, we'll see what happens, but let me know what you think. Are you optimistic for the Sands of Time remake or not? Now, speaking of remakes, though, we also got an announcement for Tales of Berseria Remastered. Bandai Namco has been remastering a lot of the Tales of games these past few years, but this one I think is particularly interesting because even though it's not that old of a game, you know, it was released back in 2017 for PlayStation and on PC, but now for the first time, it's also coming to Xbox and Nintendo via the Switch 1. Unfortunately, there's no Switch 2 version for the time being, but yeah, it's no longer a PlayStation console exclusive, and Berseria is widely viewed to be one of the better Tales of games. Now, personally, my vote's always going to go to Tales of Vesperia. That is my favorite Tales of game, but Berseria definitely has a lot of fans as well, and now it's also going to have a chance to expand its fan base just that much more. I think especially because it's coming to Nintendo consoles. Again, I do wish that they would have announced a Switch 2 version. I think that would have been better, but you know, who knows? Maybe they'll announce an upgrade later or something. But even still, I think Nintendo is just the perfect platform for the Tales of series, simply because Nintendo is just so dominant in Japan. I mean, truthfully, I think for any game that caters to the Japanese audience, it's really a bad business decision to skip Nintendo by this point. Nintendo is the king of Japan, and really, it's not even close. If you are interested, though, Tales of Berseria Remastered will release on February 26, which will include the PlayStation 5, the Xbox Series, the Switch 1, and the new GameCube, aka the Steam platform. Oh, and Sony officially revealed their Black Friday discounts. The PS5 Digital, the PlayStation 5 Standard, and the PS5 Pro will receive a $100 discount this year, which, I mean, on paper, that sounds pretty nice, but it's also kind of sad because when you really start to think about it, you'll start to realize that, yeah, the digital edition is actually the same price that you would have paid 5 years ago when it first launched. Yeah, things have gotten fairly expensive to the point that discounts are now just regular prices from 5 years ago. But on the more positive side of things, the standard edition will be $450, which is still $50 less than it was at its launch. So that to me seems to be the better deal here, but they also announced some other discounts as well. So let's just kind of go down the list. They said that you can get $100 off PlayStation VR 2, $20 off the PlayStation Portal, $20 off Pulse Elite wireless headset, $30 off Pulse Explorer wireless earbuds, $30 off DualSense Edge wireless controller, $20 off DualSense wireless controller, and $20 off Access controller. Now, they're also going to discount various different games, including Death Stranding 2, Lost Soul Aside, Astrobot, and God of War Ragnarok. But for the time being, they haven't mentioned pricing. I mean, that's kind of important to know, but even still, my two recommendations are for Astrobot and Death Stranding 2. Truthfully, they're some of my favorite gaming experiences for this generation of consoles, and really, if you haven't played them already, they're truly fantastic games. Now, they'll also have some discounts on the PlayStation Store, but there's not really any details for the time being. All right, now let's go talk about Xbox, though, and just how the game industry is changing, because this has been a big talking point for the better part of a year now. You know, we've all heard the rumors by this point that the next Xbox will be a PC console hybrid, and that's significant in the sense that they're going away from what a traditional console typically is known for. You know, they're going away from exclusivity to sell consoles, and instead they're opting out for it to be a very open platform, which Microsoft themselves have teased on multiple different occasions. Now, theoretically, that could mean the Steam is on the table for the next console as well. I mean, there's a lot of hype for that, but even still, there has been some concern online about this newfound direction, mainly because of their multi-platform plans. You know, can they really sell another console without exclusives? And I'll say right now that personally, I don't like that they moved away from exclusivity, though for me that's more just because of how important I think competition is. To me, and this is just my opinion, but I want Xbox and Sony to be as competitive as they possibly can be in every possible avenue, because that will ultimately push them to fight for their customers and not to become stagnant. But at the end of the day, is Xbox actually correct for this newfound direction? And well, at the very least, Take-Two CEO seems to agree with them on one specific point. In a new interview, he said that gaming consoles aren't going away, but I think it's moving towards PC, and business is moving towards open rather than closed. But if you define console as the property, not the system, then the notion of a very rich game that you engage in for many hours that you play on a big screen, that's never going away. So his point is that consoles will continue to exist, but much like PC, they could be shifting their mentality over to a more open environment where console makers might open up their ecosystem beyond just their traditional consoles. Now, obviously, Xbox seems to be the first domino with their rumored console PC hybrid. We also just got the announcement for the Steam Machine as well. It's a very similar approach. But could somebody like, let's say, PlayStation eventually go in that direction as well? Now, for me, I don't expect them to have the same approach as Xbox anytime soon. My expectation is that the PlayStation 6 will be very similar to the PlayStation 5, but admittedly, they could open up a bit more. We've already seen that, because if you look at PlayStation, they have become a lot more open than what they used to be. You know, just 10 years ago, I would have never expected them to put their games on PC, let alone on Nintendo and on Xbox consoles, yet here we are. And they've been doing that. Even more so is that PlayStation did something very interesting with their cloud game streaming service just earlier this year. Because technically, you no longer have to buy a PlayStation 5 console to play PS5 games. You can now go out and buy a PlayStation Portal for $200, actually $180 with the new Black Friday discount. There you go. And then you can go out and get a PlayStation Plus subscription and play PS5 games that way. I mean, it's also been rumored for a long time that they could even have a PC launcher in development. So, I mean, Sony definitely has become a more open system than what they used to be. So, you know, who knows what's going to happen in, let's say, the next 10 years or so. Maybe they'll become even more open, but what do you all think about this? First off, do you agree with Take-Two CEO? And also, do you think Xbox is just the first domino? Do you ultimately think that Xbox is correct for their newfound direction? And do you think other console makers will follow suit at some point down the line? All right, now one more thing before we go, though, because gamers are currently going crazy over the idea that Half-Life 3 will be announced at this year's Game Awards. Now, this rumor really started last month when Tyler McVicker reported that he had heard about a new trailer that's been in development and that it could be announced fairly soon. We talked about that in a previous video already, but a lot more has happened this past week. When they announced the Steam Machine, it was discovered that Valve had 2 upcoming game releases scheduled, but interestingly, one of those games was untitled. Now, the other was for Deadlock, but as far as I can see, Valve has since removed that untitled listing. So technically, that could have just been an error and nothing else. I don't want to jump to any kind of assumption just yet, but what really has people just going crazy right now is a Jeff Keighley tweet. Yeah, he posted an image on Twitter, and Wario64 noticed that he has a game on Steam wishlisted, and he asked about it, which Jeff's response was nothing more than an eyeball emoji. And that might not necessarily seem like a lot, but it was enough to get the ball rolling that Half-Life 3 will be at this year's Game Awards. Now, I'm not necessarily convinced of that just yet because, we've already been burned on this so many times over the years. Again, I don't want to jump to any assumptions. So for me personally, I'm going to temper my expectations. And I would hope that Jeff would say the same thing, because if it's truly not there this year, and with how he's letting these rumors just blow up online, I know he sees this. If it doesn't show up, people are going to be very upset with him. So, we'll see what happens, but just to be a little optimistic here, I do feel like the rumors for Half-Life 3 makes more sense than what it has in the past, just because Valve has a console coming out next year. If they really wanted to sell some units, a lot of units, Half-Life 3 would be a pretty good way to do that. I'm just saying. But again, temper your expectations, and we'll see. Anyways, though, that's going to be it for this episode. But until next time, make sure to subscribe, ring that bell, and peace out.